Hello, my name is Jeff Memmer, and I'm a doctoral student at the University of Southern Indiana in the Educational Leadership Program. This presentation is about my planned research on evaluating Indiana's Workforce Ready Grant, which is a quantitative analysis of enrollment and certification outcomes. This is a brief overview in case you're not familiar or maybe you've never heard of the Indiana Workforce Ready Grant, which covers tuition and fees for qualifying certificate programs across Indiana. It was created in 2017 as part of the Next Level Job Strategy Plan to help fill, at the time, was about 90,000 Indiana open jobs. It's aligned with Indiana's highest demand sectors, and initially there were 5 categories: advanced manufacturing, building and construction, health sciences, IT and business services, transportation and logistics, and most recently, a 6th one was added in early childhood education. The program is delivered through a number of different schools within the state, including Ivy Tech Community College, which is where my study is focused on, Vincennes University, Indiana Institute of Technology, and many other kind of smaller approved providers. Altogether, there are over about 180 pathways or programs spread across these different demand sectors. Some of the Workforce Ready Grant eligibility requirements include you have to complete the FAFSA, you need to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. Something very unique about this program is that it is not limited by family income. Many people did not know that. It is a last dollar grant program, which is fairly common amongst these across different states, which means whatever financial aid you receive outside of this grant, those will be applied first, and whatever gap is left in tuition and fees, this grant would cover the rest of that. No prior degrees are allowed. There was an exception during COVID, but that eligibility has expired for that particular exemption. It's available for up to 2 years. Most of these programs are less than 2 years, up to $5,500 per year, and you need to have a high school diploma. My initial question was pretty simple. Does the Workforce Ready Grant work as intended? So I've narrowed that down to the purpose of my study, which is to examine whether differences exist in enrollment and certification completion outcomes in eligible programs, specifically at Ivy Tech Community College, before and after the implementation in 2017. And there's a reason why I picked Ivy Tech Community College. It has 75 academic programs, with many of those programs, not all of them, but many of the programs are covered by this grant. There are over 200,000 students served just from 2024 to 2025 across 41 Indiana locations. It's the state's largest public post-secondary institution. It's one of the largest community colleges in the U.S. It is the largest singly accredited community college in the U.S. If you've never had a chance to go visit one of their campuses, especially the one in here in Evansville, I highly recommend it. The sample size that I'm expecting to get is going to be very representative of the state of Indiana. So my journey in this program towards this research topic on the Workforce Ready Grant really began back in 2021. Early spring, I was in French Lick, Indiana, on vacation, a short weekend vacation. We were emerging from COVID. I don't know if you remember those days, but this sign was posted on one of the restaurants we were visiting. And I can't remember if we had to wear a mask or anything still then. I'm sure we did. But it said 2 kind of important things that stuck with me. We are short-staffed and no one wants to work anymore. At the time, those didn't really mean a whole lot to me. We weren't hearing that phrase too often, but it picked up a lot of steam over the course of the next few months. And you heard that phrase, no one wants to work anymore. And it really became a bit of a stigma, I think, for the younger generation. But in my professional setting, I was dealing with a much bigger problem, um, which wasn't necessarily the new generation of workers. It was the retirements and the retirement rate and the amount of knowledge and experience leaving the workforce year over year for many years. And the traditional recruiting and hiring tactics just weren't keeping up. And in some cases, it didn't seem to be working. So this kind of led me to do a little bit of research on my own, again, before I had joined this program or even signed up for it. And there were some long-term indicators. Really, there was really another headline that caught my attention. It was that there were more deaths than births in one of the states that I visit, and that 73% of all counties in the U.S. had higher deaths than births for a period of time. And I thought, wow, well, we've got high retirements, we've got nobody wants to work, and we've got this high death rate as a result of COVID. And then I started looking up what that meant. I think there was a link in the article about fertility rates being a factor. So this is from the Congressional Budget Office Demographic Outlook Report for 2026 to 2056. They always do a 30-year outlook. It's a report they release every January. And I put a red line in here. The replacement rate for the working population is 2.1 births per woman. And you can see where that line is for total fertility rate has been well below that number for many, many years, almost 2 decades now, right? And so now we're starting to see that maybe those people that we're expecting to join the workforce just don't even exist. That is a possibility that I was starting to realize, impacting my professional work setting. Now that's for the US. So, for the state of Indiana, has followed that trend, and the total population growth over the next 40 years, this is from, I think, 2024, is projected to be lower than the state's growth between 2000 and 2010. So we're seeing a significant slow or decline in the fertility rates that just can't suddenly be replaced. For many industries, including the one that I work in, filling open positions has become extremely difficult due to persistent labor market pressures. And to kind of recap some of those pressures again, we have high retirement rates, the silver tsunami that you hear about, the baby boomers leaving the workforce at a very high rate. Then we have low labor participation rate. An example would be there are many people out there that could work longer in terms of their career, but chose to retire early. We have what we showed earlier, declining fertility rates. And then one of the most important factors that's very interesting is this reduced net immigration, a decline in our net immigration, which is really the only thing that can offset the fertility rates. The CBO is very clear about that. And so they've been raising the alarm for years that something is going to happen that impacts our labor market. And now it's actually happening. It appears we do have a workforce shortage in many of our sectors. As recent as December of 2025, Indiana had about 79 available workers per 100 open jobs. And so that may sound very strange considering the current market conditions and everything you hear about AI. But again, these are many long-term trends and market conditions all converging to where we're at today to have this impact, which is why a mechanism like the Workforce Ready Grant could prove to be very, very important for filling those jobs in the future. The literature review indicated some gaps. First, the available evidence, like I just said, on the effectiveness remains limited. Existing reporting emphasizes participation in aggregate outcomes more so than program level effectiveness. So you may see reports that say 40,000 students have completed a certification since the inception. There are a few studies that examine pre and post outcomes using statewide archival data. And there's limited evidence that show how the grant influences enrollment and certification completion across adult learners and demographic groups. The theoretical framework that I'm using is called human capital theory. It frames education and workforce training as investments in knowledge and skills that can increase individual productivity and economic outcomes, essentially generating a return on investment. My research design is a quantitative quasi-experimental design. It's quasi-experimental because I am, for some of my research questions, we're comparing the pre-implementation to post-implementation. And my data source is de-identified secondary administrative data from Ivy Tech Community College. So this is data that already exists in their system. It's not something that I'm going out and collecting as new data. And the time frame that I'll be asking for is 2014 to 2024. So my research questions, I have 5 of them. The first one is around enrollment. What differences, if any, exist in enrollment among students in eligible programs at Ivy Tech when comparing the pre and post implementation period? The second one focuses on certification completion and those differences among students in eligible programs at Ivy Tech when comparing pre and post implementation. The third one, do enrollment, certification completion, and workforce ready grant funding outcomes differ across demographic or socioeconomic subgroups defined by a couple different variables listed here following the implementation of the workforce ready grant. So this one doesn't compare pre and post. It is really from the time that it was implemented, what is happening in these demographic groups. The fourth one, to what extent is the amount of workforce ready grant funding dispersed associated with enrollment and certification completion outcomes among students in eligible programs? So does the amount of the grant that gets dispersed, is that associated with any difference? Does that make a difference? And finally, the last one, to what extent is FAFSA completion associated with enrollment and certification completion outcomes among students in eligible programs? So here's my list of variables. There's a couple of ones to point out. The program field of study. So there are, again, many different programs and pathways. So again, this gives us quite a few different ways to view the data. The credential type. So there are short-term and a little bit longer-term pathways. So some may take just 1 or 2 semesters to complete, and others may take up to 3 semesters full-time of credits. There may be a few in there that do take the full 2 years as well. But again, there's some variation in the type of credential, which is related to the number of total credits you need to take at Ivy Tech. Ivy Tech's done a great job over the years of creating a lot of flexibility in their delivery methods. So they have online courses, they have in-person courses. They've changed the time frame from similar to what USI has done to 8 weeks in some cases. So what is that instructional delivery mode? Is it in-person, online, hybrid, whatever? The campus location, again, there are 41 locations across the state, so it gives us a very diverse sample to pull from and perform some analysis. Here I've summarized my analysis plan for my pre and post program changes associated with enrollment. The plan analysis is a descriptive stats, t-test, and regression. For my pre and post program changes associated with certification completion, it's a descriptive stats, a chi-square, and regression. And for student subgroups and AFX enrollment completion, it's a chi-square, correlation, and regression. Some of the limitations of the study, including the use of secondary administrative data. So findings depend on the accuracy and completeness of the institutional records. Next is the quasi-experimental design, which supports comparisons, but not definitive causal claims. Students who use the grant may differ from non-users in ways that are not fully captured in the data set. Outcomes may also reflect broader institutional and external changes, including COVID-19. Findings are going to be limited to Workforce Ready Grant eligible certificate programs at Ivy Tech Community College. So I'm hoping, of course, that my effort and study contributes in a couple different ways, including to research, policy, and practice. For research to add empirical evidence on the grant effectiveness and to examine the enrollment and certification completion outcomes. From a policy standpoint, to inform state policymakers and overall workforce strategy, and to support future evaluation of short-term credential programs. And from a practice standpoint, to inform educators, employers, and workforce leaders about the program and its use. And it clarifies the Workforce Ready Grant and FAFSA related outcomes. Key takeaways for this presentation and planned proposal for this study include that Indiana created the Workforce Ready Grant to expand access to short-term training in high-demand fields and fill open positions. Limited evidence exists on whether the grant improves enrollment and certification completion outcomes. The study intends to use Ivy Tech archival data to examine pre and post outcomes and the roles of the Workforce Ready Grant funding and FAFSA completion. Finally, thank you if you're watching this presentation. I appreciate your time. This is a topic that I've become very passionate about, and I'm actually going to be defending my proposal in just a few days. So wish me luck. I look forward to continuing on with this research in the next few weeks and throughout the summer, and completing my dissertation, hopefully by the end of this year, and sharing my findings with everyone. So thank you again.